Hi everyone, Mia again. So we are going to have the last panel of today's forum. I would like to invite our 4 panelists to join me on the stage. And we are going to have Ms. Philomena Nyanapragasam, who is the CEO and Secretariat Director of Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development. Philomena, please. Philomena is a seasoned journalist and who is leading the Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development, which was established under the auspices of UNESCO. And we also have this panel, on this panel, Mr. Ritvik Gupta, who is a PhD candidate of UC Berkeley. Although it's listed here as PhD candidate, actually Mr. Gupta have a lot of experience in advising different organizations, including the Justice Department of the United States, as well as the Defense Secretary Department, right? And our third speaker will be Mr. Stijn Albers, who is a Senior Humanitarian Advisor of Internews Network, which is committed to providing information and making sure the accountable use of information. And our last speaker, but not least, Dr. Xu Shilin, who is a lecturer of humanitarian policy of International Academy of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, Suzhou University of China. And she actually, although she's listed as a lecturer, she also has long experience in as a practitioner. She is the co-founder of InfoAid in China, which is a network of information sharing for social network groups. Yeah, welcome everyone. So today, this last panel, I believe, will be of great interest to everyone. Nowadays, we talk a lot about information technology, and in disaster response, information is key. Then, because of technological advancements, how we share, how we access and disseminate information has changed. So this panel today is going to address how organizations with different roles in disaster crisis response can navigate these changes. And without further ado, I would like to start posing questions to our panelists. The first question is that with rapid changes underway in the information and communication landscape and the increasing diversity of actors, what are the most important considerations for crisis disaster communications from your perspective or your respective experience in your work? I'll start with Philomena, please.
Thank you, Dr. Lina. Very good afternoon to all of you. It's really very nice to see so many of you still present. I mean, I do conferences all the time, and after 3, it's like the siesta time, or people get tired of listening to everyone speak. But this is amazing because it just goes to show the level of commitment, to further this agenda. So, thank you, everybody. So, what would I say? The question was, I'm just going to look at it again. So, has that changed when you talk about disasters and crisis communication? I think the biggest lesson, the most recent lesson that we learned was from COVID-19. Now, when COVID-19 struck, I must say that everybody was just talking about what was happening and how many people died, and that was all that we were seeing in the media, be it radio or television or the newspapers or social media. It's about how many people have died. Well, I come from Malaysia, like how many people have died in Malaysia, or since I'm dealing with more than 100 media across Asia Pacific and Africa, so it's like who has died, what has happened, and that's about it. So media has always taken a more reactive, they react to the situation than being proactive. So that was something that was very evident during COVID-19. And I think one of the things that is very important to answer your question, Lina, is preparation, prevention, these are areas that media really need to look at. And then what is your response towards that? And then looking at how the outcome is like. And then we're looking at people, like how ready are organizations. And I must say it's a difficult question to answer because each country in Asia Pacific would be different. And I say different because you're held back by culture, by the kind of response systems. Like for us, Japan, Korea, China, they had very good response systems. But the fact is, in Southeast Asia, we were still very much lacking on how we would react to disaster and crisis. So we had ministers who actually went on television and said, please drink hot water. It will kill the COVID. And then, there were people making all sorts of fake stuff. So I think that what's important for the future, right, what I'm looking at for crisis and disaster communications is looking from media point of view. Media is a lifesaver. So there should be nothing that bypasses this medium because media is ever so powerful. But how do you use it, right? I'm not just talking about social media, which is, of course, very fast. But when you give information real fast, you also have to make sure that that information is accurate. So the most important thing is to ensure that in this age of fast or speedy data and information that travels, what's important is people are out there making sure that the public is getting the right information. So the onus falls on the government, on agencies which are dealing with a crisis, for instance, and it's very important to actually feed the information on the crisis. A lot of us have held back. Like I know I work in the newsroom before this, and people hide facts that we don't want to say. In my country, there are just 10 people who died of COVID because you're afraid that it might impact the economy or things like that. So there's been a lot of these kind of stories in Asia Pacific. But as a media person, one of the things that I propagate to media is going for the truth. Because, ladies and gentlemen, journalism is a dying career. And more so with lots of citizen journalists who have come up. You and I, anyone here can be a journalist. And you don't need to be trained. You train yourselves. I mean, you just take the microphone and you put a camera and you're on and you're a journalist. Now we have that new era of journalists, and I think that's causing a lot of problems as well because there's no fact-checking, there's no accuracy. And this war that's going on, you could see lots and lots of videos that are coming out, new ones, and you don't know who is actually making these stuff. There's just so many stories, and you don't know what to believe in anymore. So the belief system has changed as well between fake and real. And of course, I think one of the biggest things that I would look at for crisis and disaster communications in this new era is AI, data, technological advances that have come up. But I'm not going to talk on that because I've got an AI expert next to me. So I'm going to leave it at this. And thank you, Lena.
Thanks, Philomena, for a very insightful intervention. Now, I would like to invite Ritwik to share your views, particularly on how AI and ADR are related and how AI has created opportunities as well as challenges, as Philomena just highlighted.
Yeah, and thanks for having me here today. Thanks to RSIS and RTC for hosting us. I've learned so much already, and I can't wait to go back home and unpack my notes and learn even more. We're talking today about navigating the information landscape, and I really like Philomena's point of view of the news and information that's ingested. I'll certainly cover sort of the exploitation of that data as well. But really, the rate of communications that we deal with in the humanitarian world is rapidly increasing as technologies like social media, better communication networks like 5G, and even just better handsets that we're using to actually communicate with other people are evolving to output more and more data. And that's largely been a good thing. More data is generally good. Critical facts and decisions are reaching more people that are at the furthest reaches of our social boundaries all the time, right? Previously, while it was really hard to get a message to some farmer in India, with the rise of increased broadband connectivity and increased mobile handsets, that farmer can get a critical life-saving message about flooding that's going to happen in the next hour that he would never have been able to get, a decade ago. So this is great, right? More information, more data, the power to send that data across the world has been an amazing boon for the humanitarian community. But there are so many opportunities to effectively use these communications technologies that are left on the table by a lot of our humanitarian actors and a lot of our humanitarian agencies. And additionally, the creation and the constant availability of these communications channels has led to the widespread spread of misinformation and disinformation. Philomena, you mentioned politicians telling you to drink hot water to kill COVID. We had a very prominent politician telling us to drink bleach to kill COVID. And that's supposedly trustful information. But that's not what I want to focus on, right? Disinformation, misinformation, there's smarter people on the panel here to focus on that. I really want to focus on the exploitation of information and how we capture this deluge of data in a way that leads to meaningful actions and information for us to use in the world of humanitarian action to some sort of meaningful end goal. So again, because we've had so much more data, the humanitarian world has been able to move to data-based and data-backed operations. And that's not just true of the humanitarian world, right? This is true of the world of business, the world of academia. We're able to make decisions, ground them in reality, and say that this worked because of reasons X, Y, and Z, right? No more anecdotal sort of data, right? We're not saying, I did this at one point and it seems like it worked. We can now say like, hey, I got the data from Facebook, I got the data from a survey, and this intervention actually did this much good and this much harm, and I have counterfactuals to prove everything that I was saying. So it's a great thing. But not all data is created equally, right? If you think about data as fuel, data in today's world, because of the volume of it, is sort of a fuel that's mixed with water and dirt, right? And so in order to use this data effectively and create insights from that data that actually lead to meaningful action, we have to create the right engines that can handle that dirty fuel. And traditionally, the field of statistics has been very much garbage in, garbage out, right? That's always the saying that we hear is, if you take crappy data and you put it into some sort of inferential statistical model, you'll get garbage outputs. And that's really where the field of modern machine learning and artificial intelligence comes to play, right? It's sort of like the Toyota engine of the statistics world, right? You can put crappy fuel in the Toyota engine, it'll still run. And similarly, modern deep learning methods are that way, right? You give it all sorts of data that may not even be correlated or may not even make sense together, but just because there's a lot of it, these correlative agents can make sense of it and still give you insights that you might not have had otherwise. And so there's so many opportunities presented by AI, right? Like some of my personal research that I'm known for presented ways to do damage assessment from satellite imagery. So instead of sending people into the field, into very dangerous environments to count damaged buildings in order to get financial aid, we can now do that same task, which would take people, a month, in the order of 35 seconds. And in fact, with the most recent Turkey-Syria earthquake, we were able to get satellite imagery of the entire city of Marash within 4 hours of the earthquake. We were able to run our machine learning algorithms that we were trained to do damage assessment in about 45 seconds. And once the government of Turkey had finished counting all the buildings in the city, our assessment of damaged buildings was within less than 1% of accuracy in what the government had created. So the opportunities for things like this are great, right? Things like detecting dark vessels, which may be carrying human trafficking victims, which may be committing acts of illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing. We're able to do this much better now because we have all these amazing artificial intelligence algorithms parsing many different modes of data and giving us insights into where things are happening and how they're happening. So there's all these opportunities that are available, and I wish that more humanitarian agencies were picking it up. But there's a lot of good reasons not to adopt AI in the current state, right? Certainly, I think a lot of us have trust issues with AI, right? A lot of first responders, like the people actually in the field that I've worked with, refuse to use technology that they don't know how it's working because they don't want to put their life in the hands of a black box. If I tell a firefighter the fire's coming this way, well, they want to know why and how and have someone to blame if it actually came a different way, right? You can't do that with a machine learning model. And there's certainly a lack of preparedness by humanitarian organizations to adopt artificial intelligence across both the strategic and the tactical levels. A lot of our tools that use artificial intelligence today are only at the strategic level, right? Operation centers, coordination centers use it for intelligence purposes. But that information and that power doesn't make it to the handset of a firefighter who's actually in the forest fighting the fire. And lastly, I know I'm running out of time. One of the things that I'll also say is that two other key issues that we're facing is we're able to exploit more and more data, but during disasters, as all of you are acutely aware, the thing that we lack is the ability to broadcast that data anywhere, right? All of our networks we rely on to transmit data, 4G, LTE, 5G, are down. Like usually those cell towers aren't working. So we don't currently have mechanisms by which we can deploy like tactical 5G networks, something we need to develop. And we also don't really have the talent by which we can effectively implement these technologies across our organizations. So, I'll close here by saying that the opportunities presented by AI are massive. The opportunities to use worse and worse data for better and better outcomes is massive. And I'd love to, throughout the course of the panel, discuss ways in which we can accomplish that successfully.
Yeah, thanks for raising the point about like what if everything is down? What do we do even with all these advanced technologies? While you are talking, this idea come to my mind. And then Stein, please.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I like the title, Navigating the Information Landscape. That's what we do as interners. We go into a crisis, and the first thing we do is an information ecosystem assessment. That is to understand who are the actors, what is the context, what are the channels, what are the sources, and very importantly, what is the dynamic, right? So once you have a map of a situation where you can see, the actors, and I use as neutral word as I can, because once you start zooming in, it means everybody can be a source, everybody can be an information provider, everybody can be a receiver of information, right? Like that's the current situation. We've moved on from the sort of broadcasting model, one-to-many, centralized, like uniform idea of like the producers have also access and own the channels, right? The TV station has the masts. It's produced by journalists that are paid by the same company that don't, like back in the days, and in some countries that's still largely the situation. And then there is, of course, social media. It means everybody receives, everybody creates, and we navigate the system rather than we actually, as it used to be. And my career in humanitarian response is 10 years only. Like my first real humanitarian response was the Haiyan response in the Philippines. The basic element there was an information needs assessment, and then you start providing information to fill that gap. That was the model that we had. Right now, we deal with information gaps and an information overload, right? People have everything at their fingertips and more than they've asked for. And now they need to decide, and the onus on deciding that is very much on the individual. We came from a situation where the onus and the decision-making power was with a few people, and usually people that look like me, older, middle-aged, let's say middle-aged, men who decided what was important for you to know, and they would then broadcast that, and that would be done. And so we've experienced, even maybe at the early stages of the internet, the criticism of gatekeeping. I don't know if you've heard about that. It's very typically what we were collectively, uncomfortable with, that all those decisions were in the hands of a few people, right? The internet has blown that out of the window. Like whether you like it or not, and you might not like it, but that's gone. It's gone. It's not going to come back. And so right now we have a lot of work that needs to be done by those individuals. They have access to pretty much all information, misinformation, disinformation, accurate information that is totally irrelevant for them, by the way, because there's information about what's happening in the US, and during the pandemic we saw that. We think maybe we had the first global conversation. Everybody went pretty much through the same storm, but was, probably in different boats. And suddenly the information, they said like, hey, but they're doing it over in Sweden, they're doing this. Why are we not doing it like here? And suddenly that put pressure on the local reality, the local decision making, in a way that actually also creates misinformation, right? We talk a lot about disinformation. We love talking about disinformation because that talks about the bad guys and that makes us the good guys. And if we then take out the bad guys, we have world peace. That's not how it works, of course, right? So like we will not be able to like cut them completely off our ecosystem. We need to create a better tolerance. for that, and we need to have better mitigation for that. We will never be able to, and some people might have fantasies about that, but like we will never be able to completely eliminate them from our ecosystem. So we need to navigate. We need to figure out a map where we say this is the local ecosystem. These are, and that's what we do with Internews. We have different frameworks, among others, the protection of civilian framework, where we say these are the danger points. These channels are unsafe. Your data is not safe. This is an area that is very popular. Right? There's a lot of people there, but it also means there's a lot of misinformation there. So be careful, right? Like it's going to the public town square. You know, don't trust everyone around you. There might be pickpockets, right? Like that's the sort of idea. And then, of course, we need to make sure that there's an alternative. And the alternative is as important as everything you try to do to get, you know, mitigate the bad stuff. And very often the alternative is missing, right? We have a lot of global stuff, and the technology allows us to do big data gathering, right? Anybody in, and I'm sorry that I'm going to put you on the spot, in Berkeley can gather information about what's happening in a sea on the other side of the planet, aggregate that data and come up with a really smart analysis. But it's his decision what to focus on and what to use and what to do next, or at least those who get the information can then act upon it. It's very far removed. And I heard today a lot of people talk about trust. So we have, I'll take you with, please follow me, the information ecosystem. We can overlay that with a map with risks and harms, like where is it safe, where is it not safe, what are the reliable sources, what are the, you know, slightly dodgier back alleys of the information ecosystem. But we also have a trust framework that we overlay there. And so the trust framework is something that we use to identify where does the trust lie. And pay attention, that does not mean that the trust lies particularly with those who are most trustworthy. Yeah? I don't know if you followed the conversation between Maria Ressa and the Reuters trust reporting that they do. Like, she gets a very low score when it comes to trust because she's targeted by campaigns to make her look less trustworthy, right? So trust is something that is important to know. And why is it important? And I'll stop with that. Is that because we don't have that one-to-many model anymore. And so you can throw more information into that ecosystem, but if nobody's listening or everybody's rejecting it, they do not trust you, even when it's reliable, like coming from credible journalists, it's not going anywhere. So if you really want to go in a crisis, and that's where we have to be today, that's the focus of today, you have to make sure that your information is trusted. And we have a trust framework, and one of the elements, we have 4 core elements there. I'll quickly name them, and you can think about it. One is accuracy, obviously. You need to be, you know, make sure that your information is correct. The other one is proximity, and I heard others talk about that. If it comes from far, you will meet suspicion. The third one is intention and purpose. And we can debate about the international humanitarian law and all of that in this room. But of course, and I'll give you a quick example of the pandemic, if you're a migrant worker in Bangkok and all of the government policies are only talking about nationals, but you're stuck and your boss has fired you because they don't trust your presence in their house anymore during a pandemic, are you being taken care of, right? There is still something of purpose that you say, are we really serving those who need it most? And the last one is agency. And I'll keep that for my next intervention.
Thanks. Shiling, please.
Does it work? Oh, okay, great. Thank you for this whole day activity. And I am most inspired. And I kept writing my notes here and there, and I now have a bunch of them. At some point, I may be echoing from a different perspective with our other speakers. Also, at some point, we are talking about the same questions. I would say 2 points of my major concerns in my working experiences. The number one is the so-called emerging new actors in disaster response and their role in generating informations. The second point would be technology. So the first point, even when we are talking about the humanitarian system or the global system, we have been talking about these emerging actors for many years. And also in the information management structure, we are countering this same problem. Most frequently, we will refer them as social media accounts, perhaps. And this becomes a problem because we see them as a shock to the existing structure, whether it's knowledge or management structure. But if we are to reframe this problem, these actors on the ground, these new actors may be not the so-called new actors, but they are perhaps the actors already and always on the ground, emerging newly to our eyes. You know, historically, we know many stories and many historical studies that reveals there has always been underground literatures and gossips before or after some, for example, French Revolution. This has always been happening. It's just that in the recent decades, they are all revealed by social media. And we may be calling them misinformation or perhaps disinformation. So if we are looking at such a picture, we may be not looking at them, such actors, such social media threats as a challenge to the existing structure. Also, from information management point of view, an idealist picture might be we put every actors into one structure following one protocol, which we might call it a principle of or a value of consistency. But instead, now we are facing a different structure. And are we trying, the strategy is here, are we trying to put everyone, including the new coming ones, into the same structure? Is it ever possible? So everyone seems to be thinking that it is impossible. So are we ignoring them? Are we just saying that they are generating information that we cannot use and they are wrong, they are inaccurate, they are incomplete, or they are anything? So, but if we take another more practical, more analytical point of view, there are some truth in those information generated on the ground from the local affected community and families. It's just the methodologies that might need change. So, and through some different methodologies, in my experience, those can be transformed into the information that we use for decision making. I mean, narrowly speaking, in a very conservative sense, the decision making of the so-called disaster responders, the more traditional actors even. So perhaps instead, here I might quote a speaker, I don't remember which one, I'm sorry. A speaker this morning who mentioned we need a certain tolerance of the untidy situation here. But also I would say the same, we would need a tolerance of this untidy situation in terms of information management. It would more or less has always been the real situation on the ground even before any modern technologies, even before any humanitarian system come to reality, they have always been there. So we would not see those information as the noise, or we may design some approach to to improve some integration between the so-called traditional actors who join in the information management or information architecture sustained by some formal institution or agencies. But also, this would not be the integration of the new actors into the existing, but rather perhaps a mutual integration with each other, and also with tolerance of a non-perfect impact, but only if it helps people on the ground. So that was just, so I will ignore the technology part. Already have been long.
Yeah,
Thank
maybe
you.
later you can like incorporate in your second intervention. Yeah, thanks, Shilin. Now, I believe we actually I feel quite excited by different perspectives arising here. We have on the one hand the need for accuracy, verification, while on the other hand we have someone highlighting the need to tolerate the untidiness in this sector to some point. So now I'd like to come back to Philomena to ask your view about the future trajectories you plan for the role of broadcasting and communication in crises and disasters. Obviously, traditional media is under challenge in some way.
Traditional media, thank you, Lina. So, traditional media, I don't know how to ask this question to
Broadcasting.
the newest generation. Do you know what's traditional media? Newspapers are pretty extinct. So radio, television, yeah. And then you have the new media, which is social media, and a whole lot of other medias that come about. So basically, I would say that the biggest tool that has been very, very effective in any disaster is radio. I think one of you, was it Stein or Ritik, who asked this question, what would happen when you lose connectivity and you are in a disaster area? We've seen this happening in Tonga, in Nepal during the earthquake, and I'm sure it's happening where the war is taking place as well. People have just lost connectivity. And how do you pass information? Of course, it's radio. But then you would ask me, where do you find a radio set in the middle of a disaster? But still, radio is a powerful tool. And today, you thank the handphone for at least having a radio in it, the app, right? So radio still remains the strongest tool ever. And so going back to your question, right? What future trajectories do you plan for the role of broadcasting? So I think broadcasters have a huge role to play in disasters and crisis management. And that's because you are the first source, or rather the first port of information. That's how information travels. Of course, you have social media. Now, I have a very interesting story. During the 2005, was it 2005 or 1 tsunami? And the news was everywhere. Everywhere that you were having a tsunami. That was the big one in Aceh, right? And people were asking this question that, was there a tsunami? Social media was already present. There was a lot of information going on from everywhere. But they called up the radio station and asked, can you tell us if there is really a tsunami, or are we just reading about something which is not happening? So can you verify this? So one of the things that we notice is when something happens, people like to verify with traditional media. So traditional media still has that power. And therefore, it's back again to players of traditional media to understand the scene that awaits them. You need to be relevant, you need to be ready, you need to embrace AI technologies, even though people are skeptical about it. But this is ever so important because data is the key. We need to know the information and we need to pass that information real fast. So I think that AIBD, the organization that I represent, the Asia Pacific Institute for Broadcasting Development, is an intergovernmental international body dealing with media from the region. And our job is to ensure, first of all, to tell journalists that, you see a lot of journalists out there in the forefront. And I saw that during the last pandemic, and even now, journalists are not prepared because they don't know about the safety aspect of it, right? So you get, even today, I was watching one scene on television, and this was CNN. So there was a huge gust of wind blowing at the back, and there was some kind of flood in the US, I think, sometime last year. And this guy was with a raincoat, with the rain and everything, and thunder and lightning, and he was being a hero and just giving a report to bring you reality. I don't know if it was some kind of screen, but I doubt it was. It was definitely real. But the question is, why do you do that to bring the news? What about your safety? And even now, you have lots of visuals of people with rockets flying above, giving you reports. So they don't care about their safety. And most often, journalists are the people who go to the forefront of any disaster. That's because they want to sensationalize this stuff. They want to be the first television or radio or social media influencer to break the news. But what they do can also cause a lot of harm to a lot of people. Now, I, for one, hate the fact that during disasters and any kind of crisis, you do not interview any victims. But today, we see this happening on television. You see people asking questions to victims who've already lost family members and say, how do you feel? Or can you tell me what you feel? That kind of silly questions. These are ethics. And this ethics is already lost where broadcasting, where journalism is concerned. Because you only care about, you know what, I managed to talk to the husband who lost his wife, in this thing, and the child has disappeared. So you feel great to bring that devastating news that someone else's feeling is not taken into account. So to me, as a person who is leading media in the region, I would really look at how do you actually broadcast, or how do you actually bring this information of crisis and disaster to people? Where is the empathy? Where is the ethics? These are things that I look at. And, besides, of course, looking at how you can employ data in your actual work, because that's very important. You do not ask ChatGPT to do you a script to present on radio or TV. Now, that's going to happen a lot. But ChatGPT repeats itself. Now, you agree with me, right? So we get a lot of people who do that. Huh? So, but the thing is, technology is good. AI is good, but you have a lot of, deep fakes and stuff that emerges at this point in time, and people are going to the moon with it. So I think that back again to where this disaster and all these things are concerned, Lena, I would really look at having some ethical, credible, the human angle to it, having a proper response plan, which I think is lacking in many countries. They do not have a proper response crisis system for media. They don't know how to handle it. And even setting up, like for instance, some countries when they have issues, who is your spokesman? Who do you put in the forefront to talk about that particular issue? Now that's important. So they don't have a crisis response system within the media organization. Some big medias might have it, but not all. So this is something that AIBD is definitely looking into it. So you definitely need a kind of setup and people to be trained in this area of crisis management in disasters and so forth. Otherwise, you get anybody and everybody giving comments, and that could lead to a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation, you name it. It could happen, a lot of things can happen. And we're talking about people also accessing information from social media. So whoever is giving information in a setup, in an organization, in a media body, need to be someone credible and well-trained. So I intend to do this in the AIBD, for instance. We intend to train each media organization in the region towards this area. So during COVID, we did that. We had a COVID response system in place in Asia Pacific, in the media organizations who wanted to participate, but some don't. So this is not a very good success story to talk about, because some people have their own rules, so we let them be, but we just provide the support. So I think that overall, I would look at AI as a crystal ball that sort of gives you a lot of interesting things to work with. So that's something that all media need to embrace. And I could go on because I'm a media lady, but I have to stop because I'm sitting between your going home and the session. So I hand it back to you, Lena.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ritwik, can you share a bit about your view on the opportunities and barriers to collaboration between tech companies and those doing humanitarian work? Thanks.
I was hoping you would ask me the second question. So this is perfect. I'm excited about this because Sue was just talking about non-traditional actors in the humanitarian space, and companies certainly are increasingly playing a more and more non-traditional role in the space of humanitarian assistance. So I think first and foremost, we can all agree that companies have a lot of innovative technology that we should adopt, right? The amount of dollars that companies can bring to bear in terms of R&D is orders of magnitude larger than what governments can invest in R&D. And we've seen this trend play out over and over again for the last few decades. In fact, the stance of the United States Department of Defense, for example, has shifted towards, instead of investing directly in building, innovations, technologies specifically for the DoD, we've moved to more of a fast follower approach, which is adopt whatever the companies can bring to bear. But, right, there's a big difference. Humanitarian agencies operate under very strict governance structures with accountability, right? You can't just go and grab someone's child and take them to safety without reporting who that child was, where that child went, why you took them, what your plan is to reunite them with their parents. But companies are increasingly bringing their resources to bear, but they don't report to any sort of governance structure, right? They have a CEO who reports to shareholders for the sake of profit. And they have this culture, especially in Silicon Valley, where I come from, to move fast and break things. And the last thing we want to do in disaster situations is move fast and break things. We want to move slow or as quickly as possible while building things. So there's this increasing attempt by these companies to own very large parts of the humanitarian assistance and disaster response workflow while not being certain players in the space, right? Like, there are a lot of companies, and we won't name names, but many big companies now have some sort of AI for good or technology for good division within them. And if you look at their organizational structures and you look at their organizational charts, the director of that organization sometimes, actually in many cases, more often than not, reports to the director of marketing, right? For them, these investments, while they come from a very good place, they care about the society, they live in society, they want to take their talents and produce things of value for society. A lot of companies sort of use it as greenwashing tools and tools where they say, look at all the good we're doing, look at all the cool stuff our technology can do. By the way, the same tech can also, build missiles, use it for that instead. And so all of these companies are sort of one layoff away from the technology stack that we've adopted from just completely disappearing. So obviously, I've been very cynical so far. I do think that companies have a very strong role to play. We should adopt their technologies. But the stance that I take when facing more and more companies who are coming to us and saying, use our AI models, use our tools, is to own our base and buy the surges, right? This is a traditional cloud computing model, right? Whatever base capabilities you have to ingest the data, to store the data, and the core critical components of the exploitation of the data, you should own them firsthand and outright, right? If there's a model you want to use to predict if, the river that's next to your city will burst its banks, you should own that model. You should be able to reproduce it and deploy it on any computer system you want. You shouldn't rely on some benevolent company owning it and just giving you the product when you ask for them. But if there's things like, hey, we can do this for city X, Y, and Z, but we can't do this for the entire country, and we'd sure love to figure that out and do it for the entire country, then certainly work with these companies, because what they can do for you that you can't do yourself is bring scale to bear. So I'll basically end my thought here by saying that we need to embrace the role that companies are playing in their very non-traditional role. We need to bring a little bit of cynicism to bear about what their underlying goals are and sort of governance structures that they need to abide to. We need to build policies for them to take part in our contracts, social contracts that we've built as a humanitarian society and humanitarian agencies. And we need to make sure that we are learning from them and continuously giving them better and better insights to build the technologies that actually make a difference for us.
Thanks, Ritwik. Stein, your response to the question about the agency of community and how we prepare them.
Yeah, I have 45 seconds. So we talked, I said my last element of trust is agency, right? That's the difference between taking your child by the hand when you cross the street or saying, I think you're old enough, you can cross the street by yourself. That's trust. It's letting go, right? That's what agency is about. And it's the same applies for communities, the same applies for individuals in crisis, and the same applies actually for actors that are all being coordinated. And so I know we're getting to the end of the Friday, and I thought maybe I'll end with a bit of a provocation. But so I want to plead against coordination. I want to plead in favor of misinformation. And I want to plead for, well, against verified information. So here I go. One, against coordination. Why? Obviously, I think we need to embrace the diversity. If we're really about localization, if we're really about agency and want to nurture the initiative that lives within the communities that, by the way, are the first responders. None of us is the first responder in any crisis. It's always the community first, right? And so if we want to allow that to happen, we can't put them all into a meeting room where they all have to spend hours and hours talking to each other. I'm in those meeting rooms, and we have the capacity, the bandwidth, the time to do that. None of those local actors have that time, right? And so I do believe a level of coordination is helpful, but like, don't think that that is what will solve it, right? Okay, in favor of misinformation. I think my colleague here already made a really good case for that. We have to be tolerant for that, not just because the alternative is like a complete lockdown of, like, you know, freedom of speech, freedom of, like, and, you know, I'm personally not in favor of that, but also because there's a lot of richness in that misinformation. In that messy data that is maybe not formulated in the most elegant way, there is concerns, there is information gaps, there is criticism that might be valid, right? You forgot about me. I'm disabled and I can't get to that distribution point. Can you do something about that? There's a lot of rich information in misinformation. I said against verified information. I love that one, right? The BBC has a new initiative against fake news, verified. Like, that's not the point. Stop fact-checking. It's not about the facts. That's not why things are popular on social media, right? It's not about the facts or not the facts. People love research. The most like extreme version of that, the conspiracy theorists, we put them aside because we think we can't work with it. They love research. What I'm saying is, stop providing verified information, provide verifiable information, right? Remember that I said there was an issue with gatekeeping, right? The control of information. Well, if you provide verifiable information, you actually nurture that media literacy where you say, well, go and look for yourself. This is what we know. This is what we base our analysis on. This is why we've selected this as, you know, the most important news of today. We encourage you to verify it. We provide verifiable information. And that's a very different attitude towards your agency of the community than saying we do it for you. Those times have passed, right? And will never come back. Let me stop there.
Thanks, Stein. Shilin, then your question is, what is the current approach of Chinese social groups to share and managing information during disasters? And in some way you see they can adapt to the global information landscape in the future?
Thank you for the question. And personally, I'm very happy to talk about China social groups or organizations active in disasters who are also my close partners during all these years. And our partners, and we are maybe referring to the so-called national or local social or non-governmental organizations in the country, but China is a big country, and so we've got many partners in many different levels. But anyway, through these years, they have somehow developed a specific informal mechanism of information, I would not say management, but by which they would collaborate with each other in monitoring the disasters and to support decisions for example, mobilizing or deployment and the on-site actions. So as to say, almost throughout the whole process, it is particularly suitable for climate-related disasters. Because, you know, rainfalls and typhoon can be at some point forecasted and monitored, and and this requires a capacity sharing across the organizations in some WeChat groups, and to regularly read, collect, and share the real-time meteorological and hydrological data, and gradually forming a knowledge among these actors, and to form their own decisions to act. And this by then would constitute a very good foundation to support some concerted actions, concerted at some point, across provinces. And in effect, I would say it complements the formal coordination mechanism and or structure between the government and the other groups. I would say it is informal because there is no written rules or a graphic showing a structure of this so-called mechanism. It's been more like a routine or a habit growing through almost 10 years, activated in April and deactivated in late October every year. And such is the information approach Lina is talking about. And this could be quite an inclusive one because it could include more specific information management products such as situation reports and need analysis as written by me and my colleagues. And also it can include some consultation with hydrologists and seismologists, their professional opinions, and it can at some point, in some cases, enhance exchange. Again, informal, person-to-person exchange of opinions and information with the government. But it can also support, in more rare cases, the so-called the new actors, the newcomers in disaster context. Now, the challenge of this approach would be perhaps an objective one, facing all the new risks induced by, for example, climate change and everything. The group members or our partners will have to extend their knowledge of known disasters and cascading, compounding disasters, etc. And perhaps there is a more subjectiveness one. Because this mechanism and this community of action is informal, they can be unstable, and they can be resilient as well as fragile, especially when we are putting ourselves in dialogue or with some formal agencies. Also, there is a methodological one, which I missed at the last question. With the growing high reliance on high technologies represented by the data monitoring system and satellite images, remote sensing, and perhaps the potential future with AI, there could be a tendency, and in some anecdotal cases, there is some tendency of less reliance or the forgetting of the handicrafts of humanitarian workers working on the ground. It seems like we can make decisions relying on those data. But what is data? When you're doing some tactical works or some very small-scale works, the so-called big data cannot satisfy you, cannot support you. So the handicraft would always be needed, but it could be easily forgotten in policy senses, and it could, because all the important large investment can go to the high technologies. But there will leave no redundancy capacities in this sense. So this, about the going to global one. I'm sorry, quick words. Why the question? My first reaction is, why the question? Because is it so necessary? I'm sorry, but is it so necessary for example, Chinese non-governmental actors going in the international disaster response? Is it so necessary for them to integrate it with that system? In some cases, yes, because they need, for example, we encourage our partners in Turkey earthquake, we encourage them to use the VOSOC and then OSOC system sustained by OCHA. But in other circumstances, especially with the relief workers, they can easily get all the support, including information, logistics, translation support from the Chinese diaspora groups. And in this sense, I would not tend to encourage them, although I would say it is good, but it is not so necessary at this moment for you to learn about the whole humanitarian architecture and be integrated into this international information landscape. I'm sorry. This is a fighting afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all your interventions. So now we come to the Q&A session. We are 10 minutes over, so I will try to condense everything and just raise one round of questions to our speakers. So if you have your questions not answered, please approach the individual speakers and then get in personal interactions. So my first question is to Mina. I will raise the question to you first, and then you can return to answer it. Yeah. Here is the question. Risk creation is outstripping risk reduction. Risk reduction alone is not enough. So we have to increase our resilience. How do media can strategically enhance sustainable resilience for future? And then I will read out Gupta's questions, so later we respond one by one. Is this okay? Yeah, and then the question for Gupta is that how can AI, this one, be effectively harnessed for disaster preparedness across Asia Pacific, which is very diverse, and what are the key technical challenges in implementing AI-driven solutions? And for Stein, the question is about disinformation, misinformation. In our efforts to address the challenges of misinformation and disinformation, what strategic measures can effectively combat the spread of hoaxes and misinformation on disasters? And the question for Dr. Shi is, cities, just now you mentioned an interesting one, different source of information. Yeah, given debates on reliability of citizen reporting or media, should we have more like unmanned technology in place to help verify reports? So Mina, please. Yes, okay.
I like the way someone has addressed me as Mina, Philomena.
Okay, I should have done
So
that.
yeah, it's okay. So so risk creation outstripping risk reduction. So risk reduction is not enough, and we have to increase our resilience. So how do we strategically enhance sustainable resilience for future? That's a big question. And I don't know who's asking me this question. All right, so the thing is, how does media strategically enhance sustainable resilience for the future? I think there's no straight answer for that one, but one of the ways we can start is for media to become stronger and more sustainable, right? And I think that calls for collaboration. There need to be a collaboration with every single organization or the other players who are out there, let's say, in this area of humanitarian and disaster management. So we need to be working together with other people to create that resilience, because media by itself, yes, it can, but we need the players. But most of all, I think enhancing sustainable resilience for the future itself calls for being ready to face whatever challenges that come. And that calls for more, to develop a stronger media, to be sure that what you're putting out there is the real stuff, and not just, you cannot be swayed by social media or by what's happening around the scene or giving up. Now, I travel to many of my member nations, and many of them tell me, I'm closing down the radio station, I'm closing down this, who's watching TV, who's watching radio. But they forget that people are still dying for information. And social media is good, multi-platforms are good, because you're able to put your content across so many platforms. And that means really, really spreading your information across. So media need to really look at their role, right? And then look at how they can strategize on that role to bring the right content, and then putting information that is beneficial, information that's correct, sorry to use the word accurate again, and also making people think. And media should also look at its role of not just reacting to situations. Now, most of the time you find that media only reports, but does media also provide some kind of proactive solutions? Do you tell people what to do? Or do you just say, okay, you know, so many people have died and that's it, that's it, that's it. It's just reporting and I can get it from everywhere else. But when you start engaging people, when you start taking a proactive role, when you become that amount of importance is put into whatever you're doing, I think you can create a resilient future for media, right? And a sustainable resilience at that. So again, it calls for collaboration with all the players, embracing the new technologies. And many people are scared of new technology. I get people who even wanted to close down their radio stations because they say that, oh, you know what, Philo, Facebook is doing my job. I just have to go live stream on Facebook and that's it. And I tell them, you don't own Facebook. You know, Facebook is not owned by you, but you own the radio station. You own that space in the spectrum. So I think it really calls for a lot of thinking about the relevance of media, the role that you're playing, and taking it a little bit more seriously to enhance
Thanks,
that.
Meena.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Now, Ritwik, please.
Yes, thank you. First of all, Raditya, you have 3 out of 4 questions on this panel. I'm sure you slipped Lena a $10 bill somewhere, certain. But I like the question, which is how can AI be effectively harnessed for disaster preparedness across the diverse Asia-Pacific region? And I really love this contextual question because it ties into what Stein was saying about proximity. And I was trying to think really hard when this question was read out about what an effective strategy could be. So here's my first take at it. It's probably not the right answer, but it's probably a answer. I'm thinking about this in the short-term, medium-term, and long-term sort of time spans. Short-term, because clearly the technology offers a lot of benefits, and it probably should be harnessed for the life-saving and the infrastructure and cost-saving benefits it has. We shouldn't lose the initiative. Just pick a lead country and have them be the technology center for excellence for all short-term, data-based, AI-based product dissemination, right? You have clear leaders in the APAC sector, China, India, Singapore, who are very tech-forward, who have the infrastructure, the companies, the academics, who can deploy and utilize AI very, very effectively. So just pick them, or maybe pick all of them, to be the technology center of excellence for all AI-driven humanitarian assistance and disaster response data product creation centers, right? And have them, you send them the data, they give you the products, and coordinate all of that through RHCC or something. In the medium term, like start building a process by which you onboard the technology from that center of excellence into your own shores, right? You need to start thinking about building your data centers, building your communication networks, building the tools, tactics, and procedures by which you're going to collect data from all these rural provinces which are struck by disasters and getting them into one place, into a structure that can be effectively exploited by AI models. Work on upskilling your citizens and your talent bases on being effective creators and utilizers of artificial intelligence and machine learning statistics technologies, right? Anything in this world of data. And then, you know, since you're onboard technology, presumably you're building the infrastructure. So in the long term, you need to think about having a very clear data strategy. How will you, as a sovereign nation, collect, secure, and use the data you're collecting during disaster times responsibly, and not commingle that data for other things like surveillance or other things like, you know, wartime applications? And what is the strategy, very critically, in the long term, to translate all of these insights you're getting from a very strategic level, in the short-term and long-term procedures, to a very tactical level? How do you take, right? What is the process by which you take, you know, a flood risk map that was created by some artificial intelligence model, and how do you actually turn that into an insight that a community preparedness officer who's sitting in a rural city, you know, prepares his community to better evacuate during the course of a disaster? So I think, you know, just very off-the-cuff answer, the short-term, medium-term, long-term strategy can very, like, strongly contextualize AI for disaster response in the APAC region and really bring these technologies into close proximity, which I think is a very, very key point, right? You don't want your inferences coming with random cultural context from America. You should have those insights coming from this region, with the proper cultural context.
Thanks, Frederick. Now it's Stein's turn. Misinformation, disinformation.
So I've been working for the last 10 years on mis and disinformation. I've been working on mis and disinformation for the last 10 years, and I can talk to you about platform algorithms, about data security breaches, about content and intentions and tractions and impact and all of what you like. But I think for the sake of this afternoon and here and now, I think we're going to be nostalgic about this time. I'll give you a number that I found, and there's a lot of estimates, but like by 2026, 90% of all content online will be AI created, right? No humans. 90% will be just created by machines because they can do it at a pace and they can like keep going until day and night. And so my biggest fear and I don't think our biggest problem is actually mis and disinformation. Like what was already said, disinformation has always existed, misinformation has always existed. What my biggest fear is disengagement, right? People will click, people will look at it, eyeballs will roll, but they will not necessarily act upon it because they don't know anymore. There is going to be, and I can tell by myself, a fatigue. Like, I don't know whether it's a deep fake or not. I don't know who's right or wrong about Gaza and Israel. I just disengage, right? And so if we really talk about something that we need, like in a crisis, decision making, if we really talk about building a community and a society and organizing it, we have to have a sort of shared understanding of what the problems are and what the possible solutions are. So disengagement for me is much scarier than mis and disinformation. And so I talked about a trust framework, and I don't want to take too much time, but I do think the key is to engage. The key is to build a relationship with your audience. What is necessary is that it's local, right? It will be local. We're blinded by the big data and by the global platforms that we're provided with, but it will have to be local because no crisis is global in the sense that, yes, we had a pandemic, but the realities in central Nairobi or central Bangkok were very different than a remote island in the Pacific, right? So yes, the solutions and interventions will be local. The decision making will have to be local. So I think what we need is really to make sure that we are clear about who our audience is, that we listen to that audience, and that we create information that is like targeted and adapted to it, that it's locally relevant, that it is indeed reliable, and that people can scrutinize it. So that we're open to correction, right? We talked about adaptation, we talked about innovation. It won't come from the people in this room, right? It will come from outside, for sure. Like people who have time to sit in this room will not come up with the innovation. Yeah? And so you need to be open. You need to the willingness to stand corrected. Like that is true for the information. You might have missed a bit. That is true for services, for interventions. Like be open to be scrutinized. I think that's and then people will pay attention. Then people will engage, will be activated, will be like their agency will be nurtured. And I think that's the way forward.
Thanks, Stein. Next will be Dr. Xu Shilin. And I think I'm afraid I need to steal a few minutes from Ambassador On's closing remarks. But Dr. Xu, please.
Thank you for the question. And well, very good one, because this would be a solution very naturally generated from when we're looking at some too human part of information. So, but my answer would be, yes, we would rely on the more unmanned technologies. It brings very good results. Technologies actually save lives in the previous years. And the satellite images, I am a fan and a reader, user of the satellite images. And it helps make strategic decision making. But other than that, like I just said before, it is not enough to go down. And another risk is if we are looking and if we are solely relying on these unmanned technologies and their products, a potential risk, I would not say it is realizing, a potential risk is we are depending on this dehumanized information to make decisions. And what would be these decisions? This information, these products would tell us, for example, the economic losses, the ongoing process of the floods, but otherwise, it does not tell us, for example, the existing resource in the community of food, clean water, clothes, shelter, and so on. A shelter, perhaps, can be recognized from satellites. And it does not tell us the organization of the society and and the community. It does not tell us about the people, the population, the vulnerable population that needs protection work. So these so-called more unmanned technologies, they are useful, but they cannot be solely relied on. Also, we had a very good example back in China. During the COVID years, a few media and also some local governments tries to proactively initiated a collection of so-called call for help from the individual families affected by the disasters, and so as to form a big data of this call for help information. But what then? Because decision cannot be made only on these big data. They need, like I said, they need verify, and then they need to be put in the context. The most loud one does not necessarily be the most vulnerable one. So it needs more handiwork there. It needs more human resource there. So at last, humanitarian work cannot be done with dehumanized pictures. So that would be my answer to it.
Thanks, Dr. Xu. Actually, there is one question with a very high number of votes here. I just posted here. Let's see if any of our speakers would like to pick up this question and respond quickly, and then we can wrap up. But if none of you would like to respond at the moment, then no worry. We'll circulate the full list of questions to all of you, then you can share with us your views. Yeah. So Stein, please.
I'm happy to start. I'll tell you a little bit about our work, and I promise it to be short. We do a lot of reporting to the humanitarian system for decision making, right? Because we do a lot of data collection, qualitative data collection, rumor tracking. We listen a lot, and we feed that into the system for decision making. And at the same time, we provide that to the affected community for full transparency, but also they are decision makers, and they're entitled to understand what is going on and what is actually useful information. The way we present those reports, and I think that's my answer to that, is never that it's a final report. It's always a snapshot, and it's always a part of a series. Because we invite every time people to scrutinize us, to say, what have we missed? What is it that we can't, like that we have overlooked? Does this reflect your reality? We organize radio shows where we have a discussion in the community, ask people, like, tell us, like, I mean, this is what we think so far that the highest priorities are in your community. Do you agree or not? And so that is how you achieve objectivity, not in a one-off, simple, like, model, but in a continuity, right? And that continuity organizes your representation of the community, of their concerns, not by thinking that you can have this one model that is objective, like, the BBC is objective. No, the BBC is not objective. Nobody is. But in the continuity and in the willingness to be scrutinized, that's where I think you achieve the highest level of objectivity.
Thanks, Stein. Any other? Oh.
I'll just highlight Jeremy's point, which was that a lot of these problems are not technical, they're political. And so, multilateral, anytime you bring the word lateral into anything, it's probably going to be political. And so I'm echoing other people's great stuff, right? Like, as long as the decisions that we're making and the decisions that we're reporting in multilateral humanitarian assistance settings are verifiable, I think that's how you maintain objectivity, right? Ground your reporting in data, provide a pathway for people to verify that data, and then let politics take its course. Like, you can't convince someone once that report is out there.
Thanks. Wait. Yeah. Mina?
I just have one question. You just said, let the politics decide or something like that? Your ending answer just now?
With some nuances, yes.
Okay, so how I read this is how a multilateral humanitarian assistance and disaster response center itself, am I getting it right, can remain objective in reporting a crisis. So it's back again to, I think giving the real story, right? And if you can just cut the sensationalism out of what newsmakers are doing today, I think we can go places, right? So we have to ask ourselves again, what's the purpose of me reporting this? Is it to get many likes on Facebook? Or is it for me to have that many followers? Or is it for me to be the #1 station, right? So this is the question you ask. But if your answer is, you're doing this on a humanitarian basis, you're creating awareness, you want to have the right response, you want to change something, then you're on the right track. So it goes back to basic humanity, understanding humanity and putting this at the core of your work. I think you would do really good, right, in bringing the right stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Mina. Again, I think this has been mentioned in our previous sessions as sticking to the basic, the fundamental principles of this sector. Dr. Shi, you have anything to add?
I'm asking myself, what is objective reporting in this question? We have been learning a lot from OCHA, and we have been a keen reader of AHA Center reports in our support to Sulawesi earthquake, supporting our partners. So in our point of view, they have been doing very good in a so-called objective reporting. The only problem for us, at least, would be they are a very general and to some point abstract reporting, which reduce some imagination or rebuilding the context, the real context. So, but I would not say this so-called problem, perhaps it could be a problem to the actors, can be solved in these multilateral humanitarian assistance and disaster response center itself. It should be be solved in a certain dynamics. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to our speakers. Now I'd like to invite everyone to give you a big applause to our speakers.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful panel. We would now like to invite Ambassador Ong to present the speakers with a token of our appreciation. Ambassador Ong, please.